helicopter landed in the middle of a vineyard. My entire family stood frozen, mouths open, wine glasses shaking, and the man they said didn't exist, he walked out like it was just another Tuesday. "Hi, I'm Lauren." For years, my parents treated my relationship like a running joke. They called him imaginary, refused to believe he was real just because he hadn't shown up to family dinners. So at my sister's engagement party, they put my name tag by the kitchen with a little note. +1, if real. But that night, everything changed. And if you've ever been underestimated, especially by the people who should have known you best, then trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. Everyone else walked into string quartets and champagne towers. I walked into glances that stuck like lint and the faint smell of seared duck wafting from the kitchen doors, right next to where they'd placed my name card. It read, Lauren Chen +1, if real. Italicized even, a flourish of cruelty wrapped in calligraphy. The estate was stunning, of course. Sunset dripped down the rolling hills like gold syrup, and lavender candles flickered along linen-covered tables that seemed set for a Vogue shoot. A harpist tuned softly near the archway where Emily and her fiancé would later pose for too many photos. The air was warm with spring and self-congratulation. I had arrived alone. Ethan had called from Palo Alto an hour before. Client meeting ran over, wouldn't be back in time. I told him not to worry, that I could handle it, but even as I stepped out of the car, I knew I'd have to armor up. Again. Emily met me halfway across the lawn. She looked beautiful, floaty dress, glowing skin, that peacekeeping smile that always meant she was already bracing for something. She hugged me like you'd hug someone you haven't seen in months, not someone who used to share bunk beds and cherry popsicles. I squeezed her once, stepped back, and asked, "Where am I sitting?" She hesitated. That half-second pause said everything. "Over there, by the side, it's actually a great view of the vineyard." I followed her gaze, and there it was, my place card. Not even at the end of the table, beyond the end, just past where the tent ended and the floor panels stopped, dangerously close to where the servers bustled in and out with trays. A cousin leaned over his plate of oysters nearby. I heard someone laugh. I smiled. Small, controlled. As I approached, I noticed Aunt Lydia already seated nearby, her pearls gleaming like little smirks. "Still riding solo, huh?" she chirped, her voice soaked in Chardonnay. I sat down carefully, crossing my legs like it was all part of the plan. My dress, deep navy with subtle shimmer, felt wasted on this end of the table. My heels clicked lightly against the wood as I shifted, already alert. I hadn't even poured my water yet when Mom passed by. Margaret Chen always floated, never walked, never rushed. Her dress was tasteful, makeup untouched by sweat or effort. She poured sparkling rosé for Cousin Rachel, topped off Uncle Dan's flute, and when she reached me, she paused, then moved on. Not a glance, not a pour. I reached for the water pitcher myself, still smiling. The kind of smile you wear like earrings, detachable, ornamental, polite. Across the table, Cousin Andrew leaned in. "So, aviation consulting. What does that even mean? Like drones for influencers or something?" I turned my head, letting the soft gold earrings swing just enough to catch the candlelight. "He flies jets," I said. "Private ones. The kind you'd know about if you ever got upgraded." He blinked, laughed like I'd been joking. "Right, cool." The waiter reached past my shoulder with a tray of seared scallops. One brushed my elbow. I nodded, thanked him, and returned my attention to the table. But the conversation had moved on to someone's trip to Napa, someone else's new dermatologist. I wasn't included. I wasn't excluded either. I was background. I stirred the rosemary in my water glass and counted lavender candles. 8. each one flickering beside a perfectly folded napkin that looked hand-pressed. The music shifted again, harp to cello now, and I tried to breathe deeply without looking like I was meditating at the table. From the kitchen door, I caught a whiff of something creamy, maybe truffle oil, and the metallic clink of plates stacking. The clatter reminded me of my phone buzzing in my clutch. I reached for it under the table and tapped open my messages. No new texts. I scrolled up anyway to Ethan's last one. "Sorry, love, I'll try to land early. Can't leave mid-pitch." I typed, "Land early if you can." They've started. Sent it. I didn't expect a reply, but one came, just a few seconds later. "Already landed in Palo Alto. See you tomorrow." That was it. No heart emoji, no pep talk, just fact. And that was Ethan. Steady, unsentimental, dependable. I slipped the phone back into my bag and adjusted my posture again. No one noticed. That was the whole point of family dinners like this. If you showed grace under fire, they'd pretend there was no fire at all. The dessert carts rolled out just then. Little strawberry shortcakes stacked like towers. The clinking resumed. Laughter sharpened. A cousin's baby photo montage began playing on the projector. And I sat there, perfume still fresh, hair still perfect, name card still whispering behind every bite. +1, if real. They didn't know he had landed. They didn't know what was coming. But I did. They didn't say, "You're not welcome." They didn't have to. They just placed my seat next to a basket of dinner rolls and called it inclusive. The hanging lights above flickered like they were trying too hard to stay festive. I could still smell lavender and champagne somewhere near the center of the tent. But here, near the edge where heat lamps hummed and the kitchen door opened every few minutes, the air was more butter than celebration. I stirred the ice in my water glass with the end of my spoon and kept my smile pasted on like primer. The toasts began. First, one of Emily's college roommates stood to say something about soulmates and manifesting. Then her fiancé's cousin, who clearly thought he was the funniest man in Sonoma, told a joke that ended with someone spitting wine. People clapped. People laughed. I sipped my flat soda. No one called my name. No one glanced my way. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was a placeholder. Conversations rolled past me like waves I wasn't allowed to touch. I heard them talking about Napa home prices, tech layoffs, some new microgreens company everyone was pretending to understand. Then, slowly, the conversation shifted toward me, or rather, around me. "She never posts photos," someone said. Dr. Michelle Harper, cousin, dermatologist, master of polite shade, lifted her wine glass thoughtfully. "And she's always vague when asked." "Vague," echoed Andrew, whose cufflinks probably cost more than my flight to Scottsdale. "That's generous." Another cousin, maybe one of the extended relatives who never bothered remembering my birthday, chimed in. "Aviation consultant. Does that even mean anything? Like, what is that? He sells airline points?" Laughter now. Light, crisp, controlled. Then someone, probably Andrew again, snorted. "Maybe she's dating ChatGPT," the table roared. I smiled again, tight this time. And then I stood up. No dramatic clatter, just a smooth slide of chair legs against wood and a quiet, "Excuse me," aimed at no one in particular. I walked away from the table, and behind a wall of white peonies and trailing eucalyptus meant to frame the view, not hide the guests. But it worked. Behind the floral partition was a narrow space between the last row of tables and a utility entrance. There was a potted ficus, oddly out of place but grateful for the company. I sat on the short bench nearby, hidden from sight. My heels clicked against the marble once, then stilled. I folded my hands in my lap and let the voices from the table dissolve into a buzz. I didn't cry, I didn't curse, but I wanted to. I wanted to scream something sharp, something articulate, something that would echo through their curated evening like feedback from a microphone. Instead, I sat still and let the ache settle beneath my ribs. "Lauren?" The voice came gently from the other side of the ficus. "Emily, of course." She peeked around the greenery, her hair still curled just so, her eyes a little too shiny. "They don't mean it," she said, sliding onto the bench beside me. I didn't answer. They're just, you know how they are. They're curious, not cruel. I turned my head slowly, looked at her, then looked away again. Is that what we're calling it now? Curious? Emily bit her lip. That same habit from when we were kids, and she forgot her lines in the school play. You know they love you, right? I tilted my head. That's a funny way of showing it. Silence again. The kind that's heavy with what won't be said. I didn't laugh, she whispered. I nodded once. But you didn't stop them either. She looked down, fingers tangling in the hem of her dress. Her voice caught in her throat. I didn't want an apology. I wanted clarity. But all she could offer was presence, and even that felt too late. A breeze lifted one of the tent flaps nearby, carrying in more laughter from inside, and for a second, I felt like I was standing outside my own life, watching someone else get talked about like a fictional character at a table set for appearances. Emily stood. I should get back. They'll be wondering where I am. I didn't move. She paused. Will you come back? I gave a small smile, the kind that answers without committing. I think I'll stay here for a while. She didn't press, just nodded and walked back, her heels clicking lightly, fading with distance. The clink of cutlery, the soft swing of jazz, the glow of bulbs overhead, all of it kept on spinning like nothing had happened. And maybe, for them, nothing had. I leaned my head back against the stucco wall and exhaled slowly. In some families, absence makes the heart grow fonder. In mine, it just makes them think they were right. A buzz in my purse pulled me out of my thoughts. I opened my phone. New message from Ethan. Tomorrow, 5:45 p.m. Don't leave before then. I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I smiled. For the first time that evening, it felt real. They handed me the microphone like it was a gift, wrapped in politeness, bowed with expectation. But I've been to enough family events to know when a smile is a setup. The host, a wedding planner with perfect posture and no sense of timing, beamed at me from the small riser near the dessert cart. And now, a few words from our lovely bride's sister, Lauren. There was a pause. Not the anticipatory kind, the kind that happens when no one is sure they heard right. No clapping, just a handful of turned heads and the distinct clink of silverware being set down. I stood slowly. My chair made the faintest groan against the wood, like even it was protesting. I adjusted my dress, took a breath that barely made it to my chest, and walked forward. Heels careful, spine straight, smile gone. My mother's eyes tracked me. She didn't blink. Aunt Lydia leaned slightly forward, that gleam in her eye like someone preparing to enjoy a train wreck in slow motion. The mic was already warm in my hand. I didn't bother testing it. "Hi," I said simply. The sound echoed a little, just enough to make my heart knock once against my ribs. "I won't take long. I know dessert's more interesting than I am." Some chuckles, polite, distracted. But I just wanted to say, some of us are celebrated just for showing up, others only after we've proven we're not imaginary. A beat, a longer beat, then a few scattered laughs, more awkward than amused. One cousin coughed. Someone sipped too loudly. I waited. Let the silence stretch until it felt like something more than discomfort, until it became honesty. If you've got people who clap for you, hold them close. Not everyone gets that. The air shifted. A ripple of uncertain applause followed, hesitant. A few people looked around, unsure whether this was meant to be a moment or a mess. It didn't matter. I wasn't speaking for them. As I stepped down, I didn't walk faster. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just returned to my seat like someone who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. And somewhere in the back of my mind, Ethan's voice echoed. Not in words exactly, but in memory. It was late August, 2019, a rooftop in Lisbon, the kind of place where the breeze came salted and the lights flickered like lazy fireflies. We'd both reached for the same drink, I was in town consulting for a travel brand trying to rebrand itself as consciously luxurious. Ethan was visiting an aerospace firm outside the city. The bartender had switched our drinks by accident. His was gin, mine was just tonic with lime. We laughed, not loudly, but with the kind of ease you only find when the evening has no script. He'd asked me what I did. I'd said branding. He'd said aviation. But we spent more time talking about the space between jobs, about family, and the way success could sometimes look invisible when it didn't fit the mold. "I told my mom about you," I'd said the next morning, walking cobblestone streets with my shoes in hand. "What did she say?" he asked. "She asked if you booked flights or if this was just one of my projects again." Ethan had stopped walking, looked at me with the kind of calm that never needed to raise its voice. You don't have to explain your life to people who need it dumbed down. And just like that, I felt understood in a way my family had never quite managed. Back in Sonoma, as I reached my chair, Aunt Lydia leaned toward Margaret. "Still no pilot, huh?" she said, not quietly enough. I turned, looked her straight in the eye, and smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just enough to make her blink first. And then, before I could sit, before the next toast could begin, something changed. It started like a question you couldn't quite hear, just a low hum that rose and fell, uncertain. Someone near the back of the tent tilted their head, frowning. A child, one of the ring-bearer twins, I think, looked up at the sky. "What's that sound?" Another cousin leaned closer to the tent's opening, and then came the whisper, sharp and curious. "Is that a helicopter?" My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. But my eyes lifted, slow, deliberate, toward the patio where the wind had just started to stir the edge of the linens. Because Ethan never said maybe, and he never missed his cue. First came the sound, low, distant, like a slow heartbeat pressed into the sky. At first, no one noticed. The clink of forks against dessert plates, murmurs of half-finished gossip, and the jazz trio's soft meanderings filled the evening like a lullaby. But the rhythm of that hum didn't match the music. It vibrated beneath it. A few heads turned, then stillness. A collective pause, like the whole party was holding its breath, waiting for the next chord that never came. A little boy near the cake table pointed toward the patio. "Is that a helicopter?" The words sliced through the ambient chatter like cold wind, soft but sharp. Within seconds, guests were drifting toward the open patio doors, napkins still in hand, heels clicking over tile. The sky was painted with sunset, orange fading to plum, and beneath that the unmistakable silhouette of motion. I stood slowly, not rushed, not startled. My skin buzzed with something I couldn't quite name. Not nerves, not panic, just clarity. The wind reached us before the sound did. A gust lifted the corner of the linen runner on the head table, flapping like a page trying to turn. Champagne glasses trembled. Lavender petals scattered toward the tent flaps. Then the sound thickened, deepened. And just as the first guest leaned out for a better view, the chopper crested over the far edge of the vineyard, matte black, sleek, unbranded, not flashy, just efficient, focused, no spotlight, no announcement, no ta-da. It circled once, then descended gently onto the estate's south lawn, the only flat patch beyond the rows of Pinot Noir vines. People weren't whispering anymore. They were just watching. Not a single phone lifted. That, more than anything, told me this wasn't spectacle. This was something else. The doors to the patio pushed open from the outside, caught by the wind, and there he was. Ethan. Suit sharp, dark tie loosened just enough to suggest control without stiffness. His hair was tousled by the flight, but not a strand felt out of place. He wasn't smiling, not exactly, just steady. He didn't look around, didn't pose. He walked straight to me. Every click of his shoes against the marble echoed. He stopped in front of me. We didn't speak right away. Then quietly, "Did I miss your toast?" I smiled. "You're right on time." He kissed my forehead, a simple, grounded gesture that didn't ask for applause, the kind of kiss you give when there's nothing left to prove. The silence behind us thickened. My mother had not moved. Her hands gripped her wineglass stem with such force I worried it might snap. Aunt Lydia's eyes darted from Ethan to me, then back again, as though recalibrating everything she thought she knew. Then Ethan turned. "Margaret," he said warmly but without flourish. "Robert." My mother blinked, then nodded. Her voice caught in her throat. "Yes." "Hello." My father stepped forward mechanically, hand extended like it had been wired to do so. "Ethan," he offered, "we've heard a lot." "I hope most of it was untrue," Ethan said, just enough of a smile to disarm without making light. They shook hands. My father's grip was firm but slow, like he hadn't yet decided what to do with the moment. Ethan didn't linger. He turned toward a cluster of cousins, Andrew included, who had gone silent as statues. "Nice evening," Ethan said politely, offering a nod. Andrew cleared his throat. "Didn't know there was a helipad here." "There wasn't," Ethan replied, tone dry. "I may do." He didn't wait for a reply, just offered a slight tilt of his head and moved on, passing Dr. Harper, who looked momentarily unsure if she should compliment his suit or pretend she hadn't been dissecting his career path 10 minutes earlier. And that was the power. He didn't explain himself. He didn't defend me. He just existed, in the room they'd spent years pretending he didn't belong in. I watched it happen, the quiet implosions, eyes widening, jaws adjusting, minds rewriting their inner narratives in real time. There were no gasps, no applause, just a rearrangement of assumptions. He made his way back to me and slipped his hand into mine, like he'd done it 1,000 times before, like it was a reflex. "You okay?" he murmured, low enough for no one else to hear. "I am now." A few more guests had gathered near the patio rail, murmuring about noise ordinances and vineyard regulations, but the core of the party remained rooted, glued to the presence of a man they thought was metaphor. Margaret hadn't moved. Her lips were pursed, her eyes flicking between us. I met her gaze once. She blinked. Then she looked down. It was the first time I'd seen her unsure, not angry, not superior, just unarmed. Ethan leaned close. "Want some air?" I nodded. We stepped out through the patio doors into the lavender dusk. The air was warm, but the breeze held enough of the evening chill to feel honest. Beyond the lawn, the helicopter sat quietly, rotors still. We walked a few paces past the last of the paper lanterns, swaying in the trees. The sky had gone indigo now, and the first star was showing off above the vineyard. "That's silence back there," I whispered. He tilted his head. "That's not fear." "No." He shook his head once, slow. "That's recalibration." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and for the first time all evening, I felt still. They used to ask if he existed. Now they were seated front row, back straight, eyes forward, beneath a banner with my name stretched across it in crisp white text, Lauren Chen, Global Brand Strategist. No questions now. I had seen them earlier in the hotel lobby, by the elevator banks of the Jumeirah Emirates Tower. My father's jacket looked recently pressed, like he had ironed out the flight before coming. My mother held her clutch with both hands, the way she did when she wasn't sure what to say. We didn't speak. I didn't slow. We all knew this wasn't the time. 3 months earlier, I had told Ethan over coffee, "Next time, I don't want to explain anything. I just want to walk in already understood." He'd just nodded. "Then let's stop writing introductions." Now here we were. The ballroom was a glass cathedral of ambition, sunlight bouncing off chrome fixtures, panelists passing each other with firm nods and thick lanyards. People from Singapore, Paris, New York moved with clipboards and curated accents, but my name wasn't whispered in corners. It was printed on the main screen, looping slowly between sponsor logos. I waited backstage. My mentor, Maya, a former creative director turned investor, smiled and squeezed my shoulder before I walked out. "Just speak the way you always do," she said, like the room's already listening. The stage felt warm under my shoes, not from nerves, but from the floodlights overhead. I didn't blink into them. I let them be there. 3 years ago, I began, I had a pitch deck and no believers. There was a stillness, not hesitant, engaged. I had a secondhand MacBook, a Dropbox folder, and a calendar filled with meetings that canceled the day before. A few soft nods. I knew what I wanted to build. What I didn't know was how to survive long enough to prove it mattered. I didn't pace. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke. I wasn't the loudest in the room. I wasn't the most connected. What I had was clarity, and honestly, I stopped asking for applause a long time ago. That drew a low hum from the back rows. Recognition, not surprise. I want to talk about what it's like to build when no one claps, to present without a cheer squad, to get your first yes after 20 silent rejections, because that's where the good stuff is. In the front row, my mother's hands were folded neatly in her lap. My father sat with one knee crossed, his chin slightly lifted. Neither of them blinked much. I paused. Let the moment hang. Then I finished with, "Sometimes you don't need permission. You just need momentum." That's when it came. Not a thunderous standing ovation, but something quieter, more deliberate. People stood, slowly, as if they didn't want to break the energy. Some clapped with both hands pressed together, others with open palms. It wasn't loud, but it was long. When I stepped off the stage, Maya met me just behind the curtain. "You didn't build a brand," she said softly. "You built a mirror they couldn't avoid." She didn't have to name they. I already knew. I caught sight of Ethan near the back, standing by the exit sign, arms crossed, half smile playing at the edge of his mouth. He didn't move toward me. He didn't need to. He'd been there the whole time. Outside the conference hall, I let myself breathe, not deeply, just evenly. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Just 4 words. "We'll be there." No exclamation mark, no added warmth, just arrival. And somehow, that was enough. It used to sting, the way they'd tilt their heads, smile with polite disbelief, and ask if I was still traveling or working on something creative. Now, when I walk through the hallway of my parents' home, I see it. Right between Emily's graduation photo and their sepia-toned wedding portrait, there's a new frame, a photo of me and Ethan mid-laugh, taken just after the summit in Dubai. I hadn't posed for it. I hadn't even known someone was taking it. "It's a good photo," my mother says as she walks in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a tea towel. I don't respond right away. I just study it. The way Ethan's head is slightly tilted toward mine, my hand resting on the table, caught in a moment that wasn't curated, only real. "You didn't need to be impressed," I say softly. "Just stop assuming I was pretending." She nods. Not quickly, not defensively, just a slow, deliberate motion that feels like the closest thing to understanding we've ever had. She doesn't apologize. I don't ask her to. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. They just need to stop burning. Back in Scottsdale, Ethan and I sit on the rooftop, laptops open, glasses of cold water between us, sun slipping behind the mountains. The desert is quiet in that way that doesn't feel empty, only open. Twice a month, we host a virtual session for women launching their own branding consultancies. We call it Found First, because too many of us were told we had to wait for discovery, for validation, for someone else's stamp of approval. We decided we'd rather start by finding ourselves. The chat buzzes with faces I've never met in person. Newark, Atlanta, Toronto. They share ideas, wins, hesitations. Some of them still whisper when they talk about their dreams, like the world's told them not to speak too loudly unless someone's already clapping. But that's the beauty of building quietly. After the call ends, Ethan leans back, arms stretched behind his head, eyes half-lidded from the soft light. "Do you ever miss them being louder?" he asks, not accusing, just curious. I smile and wrap my hands around my mug. "No," I say. The silence says more now. It's not peace through approval. It's peace through distance, through boundaries no longer needing to be explained or defended. There are no apologies carved into stone, no grand reconciliations, just small, barely perceptible shifts, like how my father now replies to texts within the same day, or how my mother asks about my schedule without suggesting it's a phase. At night, when it's quiet and the rooftop cools enough to pull on a sweater, I open an old document on my laptop. It's titled Metrics That Matter. Years ago, it was filled with KPIs, conversion charts, social traction. Now I scroll past all of that and type something new. Peace isn't a data point, but you know when it's real, and I do. Because now I build things without defending them. I share wins without waiting for someone to say, "Good job." I host calls for women who were once told their dreams were hobbies, and I remind them gently, you don't need to shrink to be welcomed. You just need to stand. One morning, I return to California for a layover. The house still smells like oversteeped tea and furniture polish. I don't stay long, but as I leave, I catch my mother adjusting the photo of me and Ethan again, making sure it's level. Later that week, I tell Ethan about it while we fold laundry in the soft lamplight. "They used to ask if I was pretending," I say, shaking out a cotton shirt. "Now they've framed the proof." He doesn't laugh. He just nods, like he's known the whole time. The truth is, I didn't need them to come around, but maybe they needed to. Sometimes the people who laughed hardest become the ones seated in the front row, not because you asked them to, but because that's where life puts them. They used to question if I was real, if the life I built was just another phase. Now they frame that life on their wall, quietly, maybe even proudly. Sometimes the loudest victories aren't marked by applause, but by the peace that follows when you no longer need it. Family doesn't always show love the way we wish, but grace begins when we stop needing proof and start choosing clarity over conflict. If you've ever had to walk alone just to be seen, I hope this story reminds you your truth doesn't need permission. If it touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe your journey, too, started with silence and found strength where no one expected it.